right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining another episode of the TF podcast. I'm excited for this next conversation we're about to have with these two gentlemen that have actually participated in past conferences that we've done at TF Blockchain, both doing some really interesting things when it comes to enterprise blockchain and how we think about value chain and supply chain and so forth. So with that, I'd love to welcome Setrag from Pegasystems, as well as Kapi from Samsung. So with that, who wants to introduce themselves first?
I guess I'll go first. It's great to be here. My name is Setrag Khoshafian. I am Pega's Chief Evangelist and Vice President of Business Process Management. Have been in the software industry for more than 25 years. I've worked both in intelligent databases and in the past 16 years. I'm with Pega, focusing primarily on intelligent automation and how the intelligent automation platform is helping enterprises achieve very quickly their business objectives, both from a low-code, no-code perspective, cultural transformation, as well as leveraging AI and automating end-to-end value streams and value chains.
And for those of us that might not be familiar with Pegasystems, what does Pegasystems do?
Well, Pega has been around for more than 35 years. We are a software company. We help organizations both on the customer experience side. So we leverage AI. Think of it as a next generation CRM. So for both servicing and sales automation, as well as marketing automation. But it is built upon an intelligent automation platform. So that's the operational excellence side. So we are also the world's leader in that as well. We are the world's leader in BPM, or intelligent automation enabled CRM with AI, and we also the world's leader in intelligent automation, which is sort of the next generation business process management, which itself has had an evolution. Maybe we touched upon that later. And it helps organizations build and modernize and transform themselves very quickly, and also automate their operations.
Got it. And Kapi, if you could introduce yourself to everybody. Of course, most people are familiar with Samsung, but perhaps not as familiar with the division of Samsung you're a part of.
Yes, that's right. So my name is Kapi. I've been with Samsung just over a year now. And I joined the blockchain practice. So I basically lead the blockchain practice for North America, which is everything from Mexico, including Mexico, northwards. And I've been in the blockchain space for a few years. I was actually at Consensus before I came to Samsung. And I really like the whole Samsung approach because it's very enterprise focused. There's no conflict between public chain and private chain, and a lot of other things that get in the way. It's a very stable and innovative company. It's very rare that you get both of those together. And I'd like to also say a few words about Pega, because I've been in the IT industry, sounds like about as long as Setrag has. And I actually came across Pega when they were still, they hadn't gone public yet. And I used to run across the Treffler brothers at various conferences and so on. And I myself at that time was in the BPM space. And so I really understand the value of BPM and digital process automation in the context of connecting the existing world and bringing efficiencies across different silos of the business and blockchain. And that's why this partnership with Pega is really so exciting, is because we really do leverage both aspects of the world. You know, people often think about blockchain as a greenfield project, whereas the vast majority of opportunities that we get are really marrying the existing world with the blockchain world.
Right. Before we dive into, just kind of the enterprise side of this, you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting. And when you talked about there being, there's not a conflict for Samsung when it comes to the public chain and the private chain. And I was curious if you could kind of touch on that, because I know that, for instance, there's some native aspects on phones, for example, with blockchain tech and, wallet functionality. So I was just curious if you could just touch on that real quick.
Yeah, and I'm remiss, Jonathan, because I didn't answer your initial question, which is what does Samsung SDS do?
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah, so so Samsung SDS is the software and services division of Samsung. There are two blockchain initiatives inside of the Samsung family. One is the public chain, which is on the device side. And we are able to integrate the enterprise side and the device side. So I work with Samsung SDS, which in the context of Samsung is a small division, but in the context of the world, it's a $10 billion operation. And we are entirely focused on private chain, enterprise blockchain. But the great thing about being part of the Samsung family is that we can bring in the assets from the other parts of Samsung, including the public chain aspect, the key store aspect, the handsets, highly secure handsets, all of that stuff. We can build an end-to-end solution just with the Samsung family of products.
Right. Very interesting. And and that makes sense. And then so when you think about then, that lack of conflict is because you're essentially building the tool, for others to be able to use, right?
Yeah, that's right. And enterprises today are mostly focused on, I say mostly, I haven't come across a single opportunity in the enterprise space where they really want to go public chain. So it's good to be really focused on that area of private chain and enterprise blockchain, which is what we do.
Right. And so real quick before we get into the enterprise side of this, so when you see things like different public chains that are leveraging Samsung, is that done where essentially it kind of by API and they're just building on top of Samsung's platform, or how is that happening? Help us understand that.
So this is the other part of Samsung. So I probably know as much as anybody who reads the press.
Okay.
But basically, Samsung has launched a new key store architecture inside of the handsets.
Got it.
And in the early days, it only supported ERC20 tokens. So anybody who's utilizing those ERC20 tokens can basically leverage the APIs, and they've got their own SDK for that architecture. But they've also got their own platform, which also has an SDK. So you can either connect your public chain blockchain or private chain blockchain into their environment using their SDKs and APIs, or you can have an Ethereum-based, architecture and crypto structure for which they've already built a wallet.
Got it.
Their wallet also takes things like Bitcoin. They've got the number keeps changing, but they've got a number of cryptocurrencies that they support today.
Got it. Awesome. So, okay, great. So, with that, then, help us understand like why, a company like Samsung would work with Pega, and, when we start thinking, and we can use that essentially as the analogy or the, the example here when we hear about enterprise blockchain, right? Because obviously we hear a lot about that, and some projects or some things are more interesting than others, and we don't necessarily always know like how fulfilled or how complete something is. But it seems to be that what you two have been doing has has been something you've been working on for quite a bit now, correct?
Yeah, Setrag, I don't know if you want to set the scene by talking about the intelligent process automation, because that plays really well into the blockchain space. How do you want to play this? I can talk about it from our side.
Yeah, maybe I give a little overview, and then it's the question. Jonathan's question is why Samsung with Pega. I'll come from the why Pega with Samsung perspective. So if you look at the core challenges that organizations are facing in this era of digitization and digital transformation, if you take a top-down approach, what are the major challenges? Well, one category of major challenge is silos. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at an organization, the org chart has survived, hasn't it? We have different business units and org charts, and by its very nature, it creates silos within organizations. But
Right.
if you look at value streams, value chains, another word for it, which I really like, is micro journeys from the interaction or a customer journey that a customer has with the enterprise all the way to fulfilling, like, for example, it could be purchasing, opening an account, or having a dispute, etc. It traverses various business units. So by its very nature is horizontal across the business unit. So you
Mm-hmm.
have the org chart, which is vertical, and value streams. And of course, it's a process that orchestrates people, enterprise applications, connected devices, etc. It is horizontal. So what Pega does in challenging or addressing these challenges is that it takes this horizontal value stream, this process, digitizes it and automates it, and also supports low code, no code, so that you're not very heavy. I mean, if you look today on programming, I've also been an adjunct professor, even a full-time professor in computer science for many years. If you look at the top 10 programming languages, for example, yeah, we changed the syntax here and there, etc., but the technology has not really changed until we came to this model driven, low code, no code, very quickly involving the business stakeholder, empowering them to capture their objectives within running code in the context of these digitized processes. So it's accelerating innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So you're accelerating automation, addressing the silo challenge, and you're accelerating innovation. But I don't want to forget the blockchain. Why blockchain? Well, when you are dealing with these processes, which can also help you in integrating the various sources of data, systems of record, almost like a process-centric master data management capability that it provides for you, the single version of the truth of the process of the business logic, and then integrating with your systems of record. When you're doing that within the enterprise, in many applications, you need also to involve trading partners. So you need trusted, secure version of the truth across enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas BPM and its intelligent automation addresses the value streams and the micro journeys within the enterprise, now you're getting in supply chain. I mean, with Kapi, it was really a pleasure to work on warranty value chains. You have many opportunities involving like suppliers, involving field service technicians in applications like automotive. You involve the OEM, the dealer. Now you want to have the same capability of no code, low code, intelligent automation, but now involving trading partners. And that's where we see the value of the blockchain. I think Kapi can elaborate more for
Yeah.
this marriage, which is very, very powerful.
Yeah. So it sounds like really, the reason why you're relying on the blockchain is the record management of it, even after the fact, right? So then, so the accessibility and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Setrag covered quite a lot of detail there, but at a very simple level, we're talking about three basic things. One is a single source of the truth. The second one is trust. And the third one is security and privacy. So there are basically technological challenges, sharing information and managing processes across the different silos. But there are also uh, people problems in terms of organizations and cultures and so on and so forth. So you've got to create, the foundation is a trusted environment that allows you to interact without fear of your competitor finding out what you know. The second
Mm-hmm.
part of it is, because it's a decentralized architecture, everybody knows the information they need at the same moment in time. There's no delay between, A or B finding out where the information is. So that layer of trust is really, really important. And the fact that it's a trusted piece of data being accessed by a role-based definition is really, really important. And we bring that into the equation, that basically frees up the environment and moves you from being reactive to being much more proactive in everything that you do. And I
Got it.
think that's fundamentally what, and it has to be a marriage of the two worlds. It cannot be in isolation.
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. And so, let's, if we can kind of dive a little bit deeper into, the supply chain, value chain aspects of things. It's definitely a use case that gets thrown around a lot, right? When it comes to blockchain overall. I'd love to just dive a little bit deeper into like how that might work, with what you're both doing, and why that's been successful.
Yeah, maybe I touch upon it at a high level. And then one thing which we really were impressed working with Samsung is that they have a lot of, more than 100 Kapi, if I'm not wrong, of actually in production use cases in different industries. And that is very, very important. So let me stay with this warranty value chain. And by the way, we have some resources for that. We have a white paper. In the blockchain world, you have to write a white paper, right? And Kapi and I, and together with our partner Tech Mahindra, we co-authored a white paper that is available both from the Pega, Tech Mahindra, and Samsung websites. We can make the link available. So you might, at a high level, and then Kapi can go into the deeper case studies and then delve deeper into the blockchain technology, that when you kick off a warranty value chain, and warranty is very important in manufacturing, I will give a very high level view of the various milestones you like that. You have to register the product and the owner. Let's say it's a connected car. You have to register. That's a natural for blockchain, right? So that you have the single trusted version of the truth, as Kapi was referencing, of that particular asset. Mm-hmm. That now the OEM, the dealer, etc., that all can see. And then there is the claims processing of that warranty that have a lot of opportunities for blockchain itself, even including the payment. And then you might involve a field service technician, the availability, the geolocationing, tracking of that field service technician. Again, blockchain, again, you're running the process, by the way, the value stream, the journey, but you're leveraging every now and then blockchain technology. You can have suppliers, right? If there is a part that had a problem in it, it might involve a supplier, the tracking of when that part comes, as well as the recovery of the payment. Again, these are all, I'm highlighting the opportunities in the context of this end-to-end value stream. And then, of course, the warranty payment itself, to, let's say, maybe the dealer fixed it and you need to pay them. Here is a high-level value stream or value chain. There is a journey and milestones and in multiple places. You have the opportunities for blockchain. Kapi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, most companies have got, talking about the example that Setrag brought up, most companies have a warranty system of some sort. You could argue, one's better than the other or whatever. But in spite of spending huge amounts of money on warranty systems, there are still gaps in the efficiency, both in terms of, I would segment it into maybe 2 or 3 main areas. One is there's a huge opportunity to automate many of the payment systems, which introduces a lot of efficiency into the system and speeds things up. The second part is there's a lot of counterfeit parts, gray market parts that have entered the supply chain that you need to identify, because that influences who you pay, what you pay, and how you do it, and how you eliminate fraud. So there's some of these very, very key aspects that you can, if you have a blockchain that's this universal truth regarding genuine parts, as an example. I'm just using one example.
Sure.
Warranty is a more complex kind of beast. You can basically start to eradicate fraud. And if you take automotive as an example, I know for a fact that the gray markets counterfeit parts business is, depending on whose numbers you read, is somewhere between 25 and $45 billion.
Wow, and so very significant.
Yeah, and if you look at the cell phone industry, it's in the region of about $30 billion, $20 to $30 billion.
Wow, yeah.
And so there's huge opportunity to do two things. One is to reduce the burden on the OEMs, but the other part of it is you can actually create a new market for the OEMs to start to sell genuine parts and maintain warranties. You know, if you take your phone to trade it in, let's say, you know, you've got an old phone from last year, the company's just launched a new model, you want to take it in and trade it in. You go into your retailer and they give you a value for your phone, right? And then, of course, they pay you, I don't know, however much, $100, $200, whatever it is. And then they have to return that phone to the manufacturer. When the manufacturer gets the phone, they look at it and they see that it doesn't have either a genuine battery or a genuine screen or whatever. And so at that point, you've kind of lost your money. And in addition to that, you've paid for the postage and the processing costs of discovering that this phone is not really the real deal. And so there's huge opportunity in the supply chain. And that's just talking about one piece, which is warranty and parts validation.
Yeah.
But there are other areas. You know, we've done projects right now. One of our flagship customers is the Maritime Logistics Consortium. And we are basically using IoT and supply chain processes to manage produce between Asia and Europe, between 38 different members of the consortium. And they're shipping companies, they're producers, they're banks, they're insurance companies, they're the ports. And what we are basically doing is we are changing the track and trace of cold chain goods in real time and providing them proactive mechanisms to correct. So if a shipment is in the middle of the ocean, something goes awry, let's say temperature or there's a storm and it gets messed up, whatever, shocks are too high, you can preemptively warn the supplier that this container is probably not going to be good when it arrives at its destination. So why don't you ship another set rather than waiting for it to arrive at the destination? Or
super interesting.
Even worse, if it arrives in the supermarket and somebody falls ill or dies,
right.
You know, that's the more extreme case. So these are the kinds of examples that we're working on right now, which I think show the value of blockchain over traditional systems.
Most definitely. Yeah, it's super interesting. You know, so with that, I'd love to touch on, you know, the detractors of blockchain, right? So what someone might say that's listening to this right now, say like, okay, this is great. Thanks, Kapi. Thanks, Setrag. But why can't I just use, you know, a traditional regular database? Like, why does this need to be on blockchain? Isn't blockchain slow? You know, so I'd love to know from the business, you know, from a business decision, why from a business decision does this make more sense for you both to be using this as blockchain as opposed to, the way it might have been done before.
Do you want me to go first, Setrag?
Yes, please.
Okay.
This is
All
more
right.
your turn, and I'll
Yeah.
give a few comments on
Yeah.
my end.
So the truth is that people have been trying to do this with traditional technology for quite some time. And because of organizational structures that Setrag talked about, as well as technological challenges, they've really struggled to do it. And by the way, I'm not one of these people who thinks that blockchain is the panacea to everything. You really have to pick your pain point and understand where blockchain brings value, right? So, for example, if I'm a freight carrier and I've been trying for years and years to improve efficiency at the airports when I load my planes, because I keep my time deadline, and I'm penalties, and I'm missing delivery commitments and all of that kind of stuff, purely because I don't know where all the equipment at the airport is for me to load and unload the gear when it gets to its destination. That's something, and one of the reasons for that is in airports, these different assets are managed by contractors. They all have their own independent siloed systems. There's no single version of the truth in terms of location, condition, availability, and all of that kind of stuff. So you need to create a mechanism that really connects all of the different pieces and solves the business problem. As Setrag was pointing out, the business problem is usually horizontal, but the organizations and the systems tend to be siloed. So the reason blockchain makes sense is you can change the level of trust that allows you to traverse those different, what today are basically inhibitors to business process. So you really got to look for where does the value come from. You made a point there, Jonathan, about performance. And it's true. You've got to be really smart about the way you apply blockchain.
Yeah.
Blockchains are generally not very good at writing. They're very good at reading, very, very fast at reading, delivering information. So you've got to architect your solution in that context. And that's a highly simplified answer. I know the truth is probably a lot more complicated, but at a very simple level, it's all about architecting the solution in the right way and to make sure it's a fit. And like I said before, blockchain is not for everyone and not for everything. You really have to spend a little time thinking it through.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually like how you put that, though. I know you mentioned that it's oversimplified, but I think you're right, in the sense of about reading as opposed to writing. A lot of times when we hear blockchain detractors is because they're really thinking about it from the writing context.
Yeah. So I'll give you a really simple example. Sorry, Setrag, if you don't mind. When we started on the journey of warranty, people were talking about placing a digital twin of the component on the blockchain. If you do that, you will kill the blockchain. Basically, there's just too much data. So what you need to do is you need to strip out the information that is critical to the business flow and just publish that on the blockchain. And suddenly you've got like 1% of the right requirements than if you really put a true digital twin on the blockchain.
Yeah.
So you got to get smart about the way you apply it.
Right. And then by doing it that way, you're still able to get that read functionality that you're looking for, which is like that, validation and the essentially the record management like we've talked about.
Right.
Yeah. Setrag, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Kapi is spot on. But I want to clarify a couple of things. If I look at, as an analogy, the low-code, no-code world, when that value proposition in terms of productivity, building innovative solution is presented, often somebody comes and says, yeah, but I can do that in Java, or I can do that in C#, I can do that in some other technology. And the answer is yes, right? So the analogy is in blockchain, somebody might say, well, know your customer, we've been doing that in another means, right? Clearing checks between financial organization. We've been doing that with Swift and other technologies. And so centralized has been around, but the blockchain is capturing a mega trend, a mega disintermediation and decentralization trend. Can you do it with centralization? Yes. How well did it do, right? We know all the stories, right? The nightmare stories of centralization and the challenges. So
Yeah.
there is a mega trend. Some people think this is from the Internet of Information to the Internet of Things to the Internet of Value. There is
Right.
decentralized application. This is a major trend. Now, having said that, a couple of months ago, I was at two conferences. There was a blockchain conference. This was in Calgary, Canada, focusing on oil and gas, a blockchain conference, and an IoT conference. Well, the attendance in the IoT conference was much, much bigger, right? I'm just giving you a simple example. Why? Because blockchain is relatively immature compared to many, many other technologies. The promise is there. It's a mega trend in terms of decentralization, but compared to other technologies, it is still immature, and a lot of these challenges are being worked out. The potential is tremendous, so we're very excited to work with Samsung. We see tremendous potential, but we should not fool ourselves. It's relatively immature compared to many other technologies.
Right.
And Jonathan, if you don't mind, so Setrag
Please.
raised a really important point, I think, and that's regarding low code and no code. So one of the really important aspects of designing a blockchain is figuring out what needs to be on chain and what needs to be off chain. And the one of the attractions of Pega is that it actually allows you to keep the off-chain pieces synchronized blockchain in areas like policy management, different processes, etc. And the low-code, no-code approach basically means that people don't need to be programmers to do what are basically functional jobs. They can effectively control some aspects of the blockchain from the off-chain side by using this kind of technology and managing things like policy,
Got it.
pricing, whatever else they need to manage, without having to get bogged down in the block. So the real answer here, I think, is creating the right balance between the two.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, super interesting. So Setrag, you had said something that I want to dive in on with both of you real quick, and that's when you were talking about centralization versus decentralized, right? And so someone listening might say, well, like, hey, you're doing enterprise blockchain. That's not decentralized, right? Bitcoin is decentralized, or, one of these public chains is decentralized. So, when we think about decentralization, to me, it seems like what decentralized matters is to who the participants are in the network, right? So if you're talking about a consortium, it being decentralized amongst the consortium is basically essentially decentralized enough in this scenario. Is that a fair assessment of how you're thinking about it?
Yes, absolutely. And look, the silos, the single version of the truth is a challenge that exists within the same enterprise already,
Yeah.
right? I mean, blockchain is extending that through consortia, like the example I gave. You have dealers, you have OEM vendors, you have suppliers, you might have field service technicians, you might have a warranty department. So you're extending it. But even if you look at an enterprise itself, especially mid-size and large enterprises, they have silo challenges already within the enterprise. And now they are relying on manual handoffs, messages, very inefficient technologies. Sometimes there are consortia, not with blockchain, but other consortia like Swift, for example, that I mentioned between banks, that they have leveraged. Now blockchain is sort of coming and providing a trusted single version of the truth of that decentralized. We used to have this term, we're not using it anymore, but it's still very valid, extended enterprise, right? It's really an extended enterprise. And of course, with the public blockchain, it's the entire universe of the population. But within that domain, of trading partners, it's a decentralized
Exactly.
centralized enterprise addressing this issue. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And one, I was at a conference together with Pega in Michigan, and one of the, I can't remember who the customer was. Actually, we were talking about the dealership network for automotive, and the guy said what I thought was really interesting. He said, "Time is my enemy and speed is my friend." Uh, he was basically saying every time there's a time lag between one of the silos and another silo, it allows a fraudster to get in the middle of the process and introduce, either counterfeit parts or something into the process, or a double claim. One of the big things in some industries is double claims, because they do the reconciliation of claims usually once a day or once a week, which means you've got either a day or 7 days in which to actually commit your fraud before they find out. And then the only way they can actually track you down is by doing an audit. And that's about being reactive and not being proactive.
Right.
So we're really moving the needle and saying, let's move from being reactive. And by the way, nobody likes to be audited. So there's a lot of bitterness involved in that process. It's very expensive, etc. And we're moving it to a proactive process, which basically says we're going to give you less opportunity to commit fraud.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like a good need there. So the last question I'd like to ask is going back to the public private blockchain conversation, and it's more around with both of you being in enterprise, spending lots of time at enterprise, and working with even other enterprise companies. I'd love to understand your perspective, and doesn't have to. There's no right or wrong to this because it's your perspective of the public blockchain or even the cryptocurrency side of things. Does Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the public blockchains or cryptocurrencies, does that start making its way into usability within either your enterprises or enterprise as a whole, or does that end up being separate from how the current enterprises are thinking about it? Love your thoughts on that.
Kapi, why don't you go first?
Okay, I'll go first. So I think the fact that, by the way, this is my personal opinion,
Sure.
and not necessarily a company line. There is going to be a place for cryptocurrencies in the world economy. But I think there's a long road ahead in terms of regulations. How do you treat them in the context of assets and taxation and all of that kind of stuff. But the fact that, we as an example, Samsung on the electronic side has now created a wallet that accepts ERC20 tokens and Bitcoin, says that they are a force to reckon with going forward. So it's definitely going to happen. I'm not one of these people who says, it's going to die. I think what's going to happen on the other side is that we are going to move from, we went from gold and silver coins to paper money to credit cards. And then the next one is going to be digital currencies that represent the feds or the reserve banks of different countries. I think everybody is going to have a digital currency at some stage that'll allow you to transact directly in the same way that we do with credit cards today.
Yeah, I see that too. I really, I really see a world where every major company or brand or retailer has some version of a digital currency, right? I think that it makes a lot of sense. Setrag, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I agree with Kapi. That's spot on, and I like also to express that this is my own personal opinion. That in terms of like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and there are how many are there now? Like thousands, right? Of cryptocurrency. I cannot keep up. Every day there is a new one, and there are all these characterizations of currencies and tokens, etc. It oscillates, right? And it's a very goes up and down the pricing. It's not stable. These are all signs of immaturity. But if I were to go back And still, it amazes me. I try to follow. Kapi is an expert, but I try to follow this industry quite closely. Um, Still, there are huge challenges in decoupling blockchain from cryptocurrency. It's in the minds of people, and Kapi, you can of course comment on that, but I see that clearly. And again, we have to tell people that, well, yes, there is the permission and permissionless. That's a little technical, but there is also the fact that blockchain is a decentralized distributed ledger, right? Now you can build cryptocurrency on top. These two are decoupled. So when we look at something like warranty, if we approach top down, we look at supply chain, we look at warranty value chain, we look even things like order to cash, we look at opening account, we look from a business top down perspective. We see opportunities for these trusted, secure, decentralized ledger to be leveraged between trading partners. Some of these opportunities will involve, monetary transactions. Will involve cryptocurrencies. So that's how I view it. That
Yeah.
especially from an enterprise, approach it top down. There is a lot of pricing oscillations when it comes to the public at large. Still has not stabilized, from my opinion. But then, if you look at it top down, there are really true business value that can get, like warranty value chain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. It's very interesting, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about this because I think there's definitely room in the enterprise, like you both are saying. I agree that there's probably some time for it to reach in the enterprise, but we're already seeing it when we see companies like Facebook think through, with Libra or whatever. And so maybe it's not, done in the same image as Bitcoin per se, but it's definitely getting its learnings, I guess, from that, right? You see that,
Yeah.
something like 10% of the banks, I guess, are working through some level of digital currency being stable, and so it's definitely had its influence there.
For me, the one big lesson about the whole Libra saga so far is the importance of trust.
Yeah.
Trust is such a fundamental in this whole thing. And when you decide to go either public chain or private chain, the trust factor is one of the most interesting parts that you need to think through before you launch any kind of initiative in this area.
Most definitely. Well, with that, I'd love to leave it to both of you. If there's anything you want to kind of say or close with, or any questions you want to ask, to say it rhetorically, or for our listeners to think about as they go about their day.
Yeah, I have a question to you, Jonathan.
Okay.
In the beginning, on this impact of COVID, and I know you have a conference. How is it going with this virtual world? And we were supposed to do this in person.
We were, yeah.
So tell us about that. Yeah.
It's definitely been very interesting, and it's unfortunate, that we can't do this in person. I think what's been great for us is just, being able to, be even better connected to, folks like yourself, right? So we've been able to interview, some great people that maybe would have a tough time coming to Seattle or coming to one of our conferences. But, it's definitely been impacting. And, our goal as a company right now and a community is just, we want to produce as much content as we can and make it available. We want to make it available to everybody. So thank you.
Jonathan, my observation on this, lockdown that's happening right now is that my working day has got much more intense.
Yeah. Same.
But it's kind of freed up the late evenings.
Yeah.
Because nobody's traveling, everybody's working mostly regular hours. So you really don't have any gaps in your calendar at all during a day.
Right.
But you do have a little more time with the family evening, which I'm hoping is a trend to stay.
Yeah, I agree. I've also enjoyed that a lot too. I've spent the last 3-4 years building startups and, crazy hours at the office. And like you're saying, I feel like my days are still intense, but, I'll go downstairs for a second and make food and, see my family. And I was like, this is actually pretty neat. I like it. So
yeah,
it's great. Well, Setrag and Kapi, thank you so much for your time.
You.
What are ways that people can stay aware of what you're both doing or follow you on Twitter? What let us know what that is.
Yeah, for me, the Twitter is @Setrag. It's my first name, @Setrag, and I have a lot of postings there for the content, the type of content that we mentioned. As I told you, the white paper, it's both on the Samsung, the Pega, and Tech Mahindra. That will be a nice reading for people to see the reference architecture, how intelligent automation works with blockchain. Or drop me an email, setrag@pega.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, of course. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and in my case, I tend to publish most of my stuff on LinkedIn. I do copy it across to my Twitter, which is Kapi Home. So it's very simple, Kapi Home. But most of my stuff is on LinkedIn, and I also we publish a lot on YouTube. So if you want to search for Samsung and blockchain on YouTube or LinkedIn, those are probably the easiest ways to do it. Otherwise, we kind of have rather long, complicated handles to contend with.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you both so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the TF podcast. Please make sure that you are subscribed and, feel free to fill in those 5 stars if you'd like to. We really appreciate you listening, and we'll continue to produce great content like this with amazing blockchain, Bitcoin, and crypto leaders. We'll see you all soon. Thanks again. Bye.